of mind. Welcome to the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. I'm Asif Body. This is on New Year's Eve, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that 2024 was a prosperous year for you, but we now hope 2025 will be an even more prosperous year for all the people on the opposite side of the camera and those of you and all your loved ones out there. We hope 2025 is a beautiful, beautiful year for everyone out there. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants face off this week in an epic Week 18 matchup. I'm only kidding, guys. This game means nothing for Philadelphia. But there is some significance behind it, and that's about Saquon Barkley chasing the rushing record held by Eric Dickerson. 2105 is the number that everyone's been talking about for the past few weeks. And this season, Saquon Barkley has been sensational to the point where he has joined the 2K club. Saquon 2K, Barkley 2K, whatever you want to call him. I just call him fucking Saquon Barkley. Sensational player. But he's at the 2,000 mark, 2,005 yards on the ground with 13 touchdowns, averaging 5.8 yards a carry. Is heading into the Week 18 matchup against the New York Giants, where all he needs is 100 yards to tie the record and 101 yards to break it. And the question around Philadelphia now, and what has been a question throughout all sports, when a team is in a position like Philadelphia is in right now. Rust, what do you do? Do you play your players in a meaningless game that has no implication for you in terms of the standings, the seedings, and all that stuff? Going into the playoffs, it's inconsequential. Or do you let a sensational player who's having a sensational year go ahead and try to make history? A record in the books that would stand for the test of time. Eric Dickerson, one of the best running backs to ever play in the NFL, does not have a Super Bowl title, but he has this rushing record. And this rushing record, there's an aura around a record like this. 2105 is a number that just it's almost like the NBA total points mark with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. When LeBron broke that, you're like, holy shit, this dude just hit 40,000 points. He's going to get 40,000 points. He beat the 38,000 point record here. A record that made Kareem Abdul-Jabbar one of the greatest players of all time. One of the things that you put on your checklist and say, yeah, you know what? He had the most unstoppable move, and he was the all-time leading scorer for X amount of years. Eric Dickerson is in that same category where you say that's one of the greatest running backs of all time, one of the most explosive players of all time, and he has the NFL single-season rushing record. Saquon Barkley is in a position right now to break that against his old football team. Against what is the best offensive line in football, at least running blocking wise. So 101 yards is feasible. And I think the last time they played the New York Giants, he damn near broke the century mark in the first half. But the question becomes, do you want to risk Saquon Barkley and risk any starter on offense to achieve this all-time record? Or do you want to sit these guys in an inconsequential game because the bigger thing on the line is a run at the Lombardi Trophy? That is the biggest question that we're going to answer here. Because I'm going to give it to you both ways here, okay? I'm going to give you the reason why you should go ahead and chase history. Go ahead and get this record. And I'll also give you the perspective on why you should not. And ultimately what my decision would be. Let's talk about why you should go ahead and chase that record. If you're Saquon Barkley, if you're any player in the NFL for that matter, let's look at it from a player perspective, okay? When you're being judged by anybody in the media, by any fan base, by anybody, what is the thing they're going to look at before they bring up your name? They're going to look at your individual numbers. They're going to look at accolades, Pro Bowls, All Pros, yardage marks, touchdowns. They're going to look at all those things. Look at wide receivers, for example. What do you look at when you look at a guy like, I don't know, Jerry Rice, for example? You look at the leading receptions leader, leading yardage leader, touchdowns, Super Bowl titles, all the Pro Bowls, Hall of Fame, right? You name all the things, all the numbers that are there. Terrell Owens doesn't have a Super Bowl title, doesn't have an MVP, but you're like, damn, he's number 2 in receiving touchdowns. He's like number 2 or 3 in receiving yards. He's a top 5 in reception. Like the guy's a Hall of Famer. Randy Moss, same thing. You name all these players at receiver. Look at running back. You look at Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, all O.J. Simpson, you know, that douchebag. All these guys, you look at the individual numbers that they put up, because ultimately in the end, when you try to get a bust in Canton, Ohio, and you want to be a Hall of Famer, they don't care whether or not you're a 5-time, 7-time, 6-time Super Bowl champion, unless you're a quarterback. If you're a player, they look at your numbers. They look at your reign of dominance. They look at the fact that, hey, 10 plus years in the NFL, this dude was a dominant player. Look at Julio Jones, for example. Doesn't have a Super Bowl title, doesn't have any sort of MVP record like that. But you know what you're going to say? That's a future Hall of Famer. Calvin Johnson, future Hall of Famer. Andre Johnson, Hall of Famer. None of those guys have winning records in terms of being the catalyst for a team to win Super Bowls. But they put up numbers. Adrian Peterson. Yes, he has the MVP year where he broke his 2,000-yard mark, but you don't look at Adrian Peterson and say, wow, he was the catalyst for what the Minnesota Vikings were in his heyday. No, you look at the fact that he has 10,000 yards rushing, he has an MVP, had the 2,000-yard season, and is one of the greatest runners of all time. So when you're an NFL player and your whole objective in your NFL career is to get paid big bucks, and if you have the chance to do it, put up big numbers in order for you to cement your legacy and cement yourself in the history books of the National Football League. You do everything you possibly can to achieve numbers. That's why players all the time worry about their stats. It's how they get paid. It's how they get judged by the media. It's how they get accolades. It's how the media votes for their accolades. You look at all those things and you say to yourself, wow, Saquon Barkley right now isn't a Hall of Fame running back. It's a Hall of Fame talent, but it's not a Hall of Fame running back. How much would breaking the 2105 mark mean for Saquon Barkley and potentially his trajectory going into the Hall of Fame? What if he posts another, 1,200 yards for the rest of his career with Philadelphia, and he has the 2105 record? Does he become a Hall of Famer? It's possible. Because this guy's season this far has been sensational. And he's unfortunately been with the New York Giants his whole career, where they completely wasted the man's total football ability. Saquon Barkley's finally looking at this and he's saying to himself, wow, I'm playing on a team where I'm not getting touched until I'm 4 yards up the field. And I mean that, and I say that because he has 345 carries on the year, which is a lot of carries. But he's not getting hit until he's in the second or third level by a safety or a light linebacker. That is significantly different than what he was dealing with in New York. It's significantly different because now he's starting to get the recognition as potentially being one of the great running backs of the NFL today. Not that he wasn't getting recognition before with the New York Giants, but now he's getting put on national stages. Now he's getting put with some of the best players in the National Football League, being discussed in the MVP conversation. All because he's eclipsed the 2,000-yard mark, and because he's getting 5.8 yards a clip. All because he has 13 touchdowns. All because he's behind this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, and because the record of the NFL single-season rushing record is within his grasp against the team that told him to take a hike. So you know the game is personal for Saquon Barkley. And for everybody who is at the running back position, all the players who want to grow up and be potentially in the NFL and want to play running back, this record could potentially change the course of how running backs are looked at in the modern day era. If Saquon Barkley go ahead and achieves this record, all of a sudden running backs get looked at a whole different light. can completely change the complexion of the football team. CMC, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, those guys changed the complexion of the running back position, and it would be further changed if Saquon Barkley breaks this record. And not only does it mean so much for Saquon Barkley, not only does it mean so much for running backs in general, this means so much to the offensive line group that's in Philadelphia, the Great Wall of Philly. This means so much to Jeff Stoutland. This means so much to all the guys in the locker room, something that this team can hang its hat on at the end of the year before the playoff run and say, wow, look at what this man accomplished. 2,000 yards in a single season, 2105 potentially, breaking that record to be cemented in the history books as to have the greatest single rushing season in the history of the NFL. It's something to not be slighted at. Absolutely not be slighted at. And that's what that record means. And that's why, if you're somebody who sits there and says, yeah, Saquon Barkley should go out there and go get that record, those are the reasons why. However, on the flip side, though, you got to look at it like this. The man has 345 carries. He did break the 2,000-yard mark. And this game that we're about to play right now against the New York Giants, it's inconsequential to us in the seedings of the NFC. What is the absolute risk to reward ratio that we have going into this ball game? You could also argue that Philadelphia tipped its hand last week against the Cowboys. Once he broke the 2,000-yard mark, completely took him out of the game. And they decided, and maybe if you think like me, I'm giving my answer a little bit earlier. I think at that point they kind of tipped their hand and they said, you know what? We'll get the 2,000-yard mark. But once we hit 2,000, that's it. We're shutting you down until the playoff run. We don't want any more risk of injury to occur here, because say what you want about this Philadelphia Eagles football team, as talented as it is, the reason this team is in the position that it's in right now is because 26 is in the backfield. And it's because 26 has won us game after game after game after game. He's been one of the most consistent players, not only in the NFL, but one of the only consistent options game after game after game that are guaranteed to make an impact play. Because you can look at the passing game and say, hey, this passing game is ranked, 30th in the NFL, 31st in the NFL? It's not efficient. But damn it, we have a running back that gets 6 yards a fucking clip. Do I want to risk that? Do I want him to sprain an ankle, to get an offensive lineman rolled up on? Do I want to risk injury to this singular player, to this singular unit in the offensive line, where now I go into the playoffs against potentially the Green Bay Packers and say to myself, yeah, I don't have my best to second best offensive player in the league right now. I don't have the second best player on my team right now, the driving force of my offense against a team like Green Bay, against a team like Washington. Do I really want to go into a playoff game where Jalen Hurts hasn't played in 3 weeks? Because he's probably not going to play against the Giants if you said Saquon Barkley, right? Do I really want to go into a playoff game with those things, being part of the discussion here, and risk potentially a playoff run because I wanted to, chase a record? And here's another one for you. Last year, when we were in our funk, when we went from 10-1 to 11 and whatever it was, 11-6. We played the last week of the season against the New York Giants. We went to MetLife. We thought to ourselves, hey, this would be the perfect game to get the offense going, to get into rhythm before the playoffs begin. Maybe, just maybe, we could catch some sort of spark before we go on the road to Tampa Bay. And what happened in that game? A.J. Brown got injured, and he couldn't play in Tampa Bay. And it completely deflated any sliver of hope that you thought you would have that Philadelphia could squeeze out a playoff victory. For people who say we should rest Saquon Barkley, that's your trump card. You say to yourself, hey, we did this last season. We tried to fight through that. And we lost our best offensive player going into a playoff game. Do we really want to risk that again? What does 2105 mean if we don't have a Super Bowl title as a team? I'll tell you what. If you're an Eagle fan, the question you ask yourself right now is, do you want a Lombardi trophy, potentially, or do you potentially want Saquon Barkley just to have a rushing record? That's the question. And now for me, listen, I'm an asshole. I want it all. I want Saquon Barkley to get the record. I want our team to get the Super Bowl title. I want everything in it. I want every freaking piece of the pie. I get it. However, if you have to choose one or the other, because that's what it's going to be, you're not going to get a little bit of both. You're not going to have your cake and eat it too here. Philadelphia is either going to rest him or they're going to play. And for me, the most important thing for this season, the most important thing that you could do going into the playoffs right now is maximize your opportunity to get a Super Bowl title. That's the only thing that should be on the mind of any front office executive in Philadelphia. That should be on the mind of the coaches. That should be on the mind as a total of the locker room. Me as a fan, I want the Lombardi trophy. I do. You can't convince me right now, as much as Saquon Barkley wants this record. And again, as a guy who started at running back at left bench in high school, and I know that sounds like an oxymoronic statement. I was a high school player. I started at left bench. I played running back. So I understand wanting the ball. I understand wanting to be able to go ahead and do your thing out there. But if you're telling me that Saquon Barkley right now feels 100% and is ready to go week 18 against the Giants, you're lying to yourself. Of course he's not 100%. Nobody is at this point in the year. So when you have an opportunity in the new playoff structure to get a week off of not having to go up against not only your former team, but division rival, but a team that's going to sell out against the run and really try to make sure you get nowhere near this 101-yard mark to break the record. Is it really worth taking that kind of punishment when you got bigger things on our minds? When you got bigger things to worry about in the playoffs? To me, the answer is no. So if I'm the Eagles, if I'm the locker room, I echo Lane Johnson's sentiment. We got 2,000 yards. That feels amazing. It's excellent. But now we got to go for the Lombardi trophy. It's time to sit Saquon down for a week, get his body right. Sit down A.J. Brown. Sit down Devontae Smith. Get the other young rookies in. Get the young players in. Let them get some live game action. Let Tanner McGee start at quarterback and let him go ahead and wheel and deal. Because even though Jalen Hurts isn't going to be in for 3 weeks, it's not like he was throwing the ball all over the field. He's not a rhythm quarterback. He's not a 3-5-step rhythm guy. You know, he's a guy that does things off the rip anyway. So you might as well just let him rest his legs, let him get his body right, and then go into a playoff game fresh. But Saquon Barkley is the driving force of this football team. And it's really, really tough to sit there and let a record like this go. Yes. But we saw this story last season where we wanted to get something going into the playoffs, and we lost our best player in A.J. Brown to injury against the same New York Football Giants. You are going to kill everybody in Philadelphia and in that organization if they decide to play Saquon Barkley and he comes out and he rolls an ankle, or they come out and a guy like Mekhi Becton hurts his knee, or Landon Dickerson is out, or Jordan Mailata, God forbid, or anybody comes out of this game with injuries. You're going to rip this organization, and it could potentially cost a Lombardi trophy. Because if you look at the rest of the NFC, Detroit, as great as they looked on Monday night, you know they're not healthy. They're losing players left and right. Minnesota, they're looking formidable, but everybody feels that Philadelphia can match up with the Vikings. The Packers are a young team. You got the Washington Commanders, who are also a young team. The Rams look beat up. Tampa Bay's formidable, but they don't have the talent to be able to go deep in a playoff run, potentially. Because Baker Mayfield's a stud. I don't know. He's a dog. But, again, point being is you rest Saquon Barkley. As great as the record is and as much as it means for every player who is achieving the status of running back in the NFL, as much as it means to Saquon Barkley's legacy, as much as it means to all players in the National Football League to go ahead and get your individual numbers so that you get the biggest contract, you get the admiration, and you get the, tip of the cap from the media and nationwide recognition, we understand that's important. But ultimately, the goal of any football team that is within reach of a Lombardi trophy is to go ahead and take it. You don't see players in Kansas City trying to achieve single-season records like this if they're able to. You're not seeing Buffalo think about single-season records here. You're not seeing Detroit go and get these records. They're just playing ball, all about team, all about the biggest goal in mind. That's that Lombardi trophy. So Saquon Barkley, every Eagle fan, everybody in Philadelphia, the right answer to whether or not you should rest or run Saquon Barkley, rest him for a week and get ready for a potential Super Bowl run. Because then you'll know Saquon Barkley, he'll get his carries in those games just as much as he has during the regular season. Hey, thank you so much for watching the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. If you want to continue to support the channel, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. Also, check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Riding the Bench Eagles Pod. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're on there. Thank you so much for listening, and please join us next time here at the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast.